Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Cat Chat Live webinar. Welcome back to many of you, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. My name is Nancy Stevens. I manage parent and family communications here at the University of Kentucky, and I'm really glad that you've joined us here today. Today's topic is setting the stage for success. I know that some of our other Cat Chat Live topics have been really focused on things like move-in or, Monday's good conversation with transportation services. And I think in all of the to-do list of getting ready for the fall semester, sometimes we forget the academic transition that our students will be making. And so I'm really excited for you to hear from Madeline Martin with Transformative Learning today. She's got some really good information about some things that you can be doing to help prep your student for the transition that's coming their way. As one of UK's integrated success coaches, she is working one-on-one with students, and so has a lot of expertise on how to support students in the transition. So I'm excited you're going to get to hear from her. Before I turn things over to her, I want to review a few quick housekeeping items for those of you who may not have participated in a Cat Chat Live before. Please use the Q&A feature to communicate with us. Madeline has some really great slides to share with you, and then after that, we'll open it up for questions. You may find that others are asking a similar question, and you can use the upvote feature, click on that thumbs up to indicate that you have the question as well. We'll try to keep this Cat Chat Live to no more than an hour, and we'll take as many questions as we can in that allotted time. Behind the scenes, my colleague Kate's going to be dropping in links in the chat, websites we want you to know, dates that may come up, things like that. If you're not able to be with us here the whole time today, we totally understand busy schedules and all that. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to view later in the Cat Chat family community. Now, if you have questions after the fact and want to reach out, Madeline's going to leave contact information for Transformative Learning. But if you have a question about another topic at UK, you can always email parents@uky.edu to get additional support. We always love to hear from you and see how we're meeting your needs. And so after the webinar, you're going to see a link to a survey, and we would really appreciate any feedback that you're able to give us. So I think that's all of my housekeeping items. So I'm going to turn things over to Madeline to introduce herself and again, share some really good information on how your student can get off to a strong start academically here at the University of Kentucky and really just managing college life in general. Madeline, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. As Nancy said, my name is Madeline Martin. A little bit about me. I am a professional certified coach in the International Coaching Federation, or PCC for short. I'm also a certified social worker for the state of Kentucky, but my role is an integrated success coach. So what is an integrated success coach? Well, we tackle a lot of issues with students. I've provided a list for you here, but really this is just maybe our hot button issues that students bring into appointments. Our sessions are 45 minutes, roughly in person or virtual. And it's really us partnering with the student for whatever the student wants to talk about. So a lot of the main things that students come in with are time management concerns, study strategies, finding motivation or figuring out how they're going to manage stress or just adulthood for the first time. And so really what I find to be my biggest tool in coaching is a question. So if you hear me say nothing else today, I hope you hear me say this. A question, a good, well-placed, well-phrased question can be the biggest game changer for you to help your student uncover what their next step is. Sometimes I do not know the next step a student should take to address the issue they're facing, but a well-placed question allows me to help them figure out what they think their next step ought to be. So that's primarily what we're going to be talking about today, is how to use those questions effectively to help your students set the stage for success, because we really want to empower them to figure out what their next steps are going to be. So before we get into things, I really want to use a question with you all first. Take a second and really ask yourself, how am I feeling about this upcoming transition? If you've got a pen and paper next to you, I encourage you to write down some of the emotions you may be feeling. I imagine for some of you, it could be anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, excited. any of those feelings. But I really encourage you to take a second and reflect for yourself. What am I feeling? How am I feeling about this upcoming transition my student's about to take? And really, the main reason for that is because it's really important to know where you are before trying to figure out where your student is. Because they can tell where you are, but it's really helpful for us to start with us before we go into them. Because if you're feeling stressed, how much more might they be feeling stressed? So before your student even starts packing, I wanted to give you some questions that you could start asking as soon as this week, as soon as the next couple weeks, before they even get to campus. These are some good questions to be asking your student to get them thinking about their success in college. So I give you a lot of questions on each of these slides, not because I think you should ask every question, but because there may be one or two questions that resonate with you specifically. So feel free to write down the questions that just stand out to you the most. Some examples: what are you most looking forward to? What are you starting to feel anxious about? What kind of things do you think will help you adjust to living away from home? And then as you think about these questions, a lot of different answers may come up for your students. You'll notice with all of these questions, these are very open-ended. They're not closed-ended. They're not going to end in a yes or no. That is very intentional because we don't really want to prime our students to get off that easy. We want to ask a question that really we're going to get a lot out of them from this. And you'll notice with a lot of these questions, they're really focused on where the student is before coming to that last question of how can I help you feel ready to take on those challenges? What we do most in coaching is we start by figuring out where the student is by asking a lot of what questions in the beginning. And then eventually, before we get to problem solving, that's when we'll transition into a how question. How are we going to figure this out together? So that's just a couple behind the scenes facts for you, but let's move to as that first week approaches. So you've had a few weeks to maybe ask some of these questions of your student, get them thinking about college a little bit more expansively. Then let's say you've got maybe like the week or two before classes start. Let's get them thinking about their expectations. What do you think might be different in college compared to high school? This is one I find a lot of students don't think about until they're already in their first week of classes. But it's really helpful if you can get them thinking about it before they're even on campus because it gets them thinking a little bit about their classes already. And as a parent or a family member, you can be the one to really normalize their fears and open them up to some new possibilities. So, a couple ways we can go about that. What kind of things helped you in high school? What skills do you think were really important for doing well in your classes? What do you want to do if things are a little more challenging than you anticipate? I find myself asking that question all the time, just of myself, because it gets us thinking, what can I do if this is not what I expect? If this is harder than I expect, who can I go to in that situation? And then lastly, how would you feel if we took a look at some resources available to you now so you know where to go? Again, you'll notice there's some couple questions above it that get the student thinking about answers to their own questions and thoughts before we step in and we try to come up with a solution to the problem. I think some of you might be very surprised for what your student may be able to come up with before we even dive into what resources are available to help them. So now we've made it to campus. You've gotten through move-in. Best thing you can do is lean into that excitement with them, but also leave room for that fear. As soon as they move in, it's real. As soon as they're on campus, it's real. And in that first week where they're on campus and getting ready for classes, there's a few important things that are going to be really special to get established then. It happens all the time where I see this in students around the 4, 5, 6 week mark want to come in and get these things set up. But the most successful students I see, they started this week 1. So what are these things? Number 1 is a time management system. That could be a planner, that could be a calendar, that could be a whiteboard with sticky notes. We don't know what your student will prefer. So here's a couple of questions that you can ask to help them figure it out. How do you want to manage your time or stick to a routine? How do you want to stay on top of assignment due dates? Those are just a couple of questions to get them actually thinking about how am I going to manage my time? Because before it's been all hypothetical. Now it's real. We're about to start doing this. So, how do I want to do this out of the gate? So if your student is more of a paper planner person, they're going to come into college and they're going to have the opportunity to collect a paper planner. If that's what they're used to and that's what they've decided they want to try, a couple of good questions to make sure it's an effective process. When does it make the most sense to plan out your week? For some students, this may be Sunday evenings, this may be Monday mornings, this may be every morning. But another good follow-up question is how often do you think you should check this to stay on top of things? Because a lot of students are really good at sitting down and planning out things, but it's that maintaining the practice of checking it that can be really hard. So again, you just even asking the question opens their brain up to a world of possibilities here. What could I do differently? And it gets you in the brainstorming process with them. Now, I've left calendars for last because this is actually a really important one. When I say calendar, it could be a paper calendar, but more often than not for students, this is a virtual calendar. This could be Google Calendar, Outlook Calendar, Apple Calendar. There's so many apps and suggestions out there. Could even be Canvas Calendar, where their assignments live. But it's really important that they think about some kind of virtual calendar because ultimately this is what most of them are going to utilize in the workforce. So a lot of students, it's so helpful if they can get adjusted to a virtual calendar now. So when we think about a virtual calendar, if your students determined that they've decided they want to try a virtual calendar, a couple of good questions to ask are, what kind of things do you think you should block time off for first? This is a good priority kind of question. It allows students to think about what's most important on my schedule. This could be classes. This could be club meetings. This could be time in the gym because that's really important to them. But it also allows you to look at their schedule and be like, when are you going to eat? When are you going to walk like between classes? Like, how are you going to commute from one space to the next? When are you going to take time to relax? When are you going to take time for homework? All of these questions are great follow-up questions, but it's really important to ask what's most important and then kind of follow that up with what's second, third, fourth, fifth most important. Because a lot of students come in with a schedule and it's just class. And it's not to say that's not effective, but for a lot of students, they don't realize how much time they spend doing other things. And so, really trying to block out meal times, study times, friend time allows them to gain more of a realistic view of their schedule where they can actually see how am I spending my time and is that how I want to be spending my time? So again, this is very helpful their first week so they can map out the ideal maybe. And then as the weeks go on, they can begin to move things around. And the virtual calendars make it very easy to move things around if it's something that doesn't feel sustainable. The last question piece for calendars here is what kind of reminders would be most helpful? Because almost any virtual calendar they use is going to have some kind of reminder system built into it. It can be 15, 30, an hour before, but those reminders can be really helpful to students in the first few weeks so they get kind of an accurate view of time for how long does it actually take me to get to class. If I leave when that 15-minute reminder goes off and I'm not making it to class on time, I might need to set a 30-minute reminder. So those are the kinds of things that when we think about our time management, again, these are the kinds of questions that just allow your student to think about it from their perspective. I find that as a coach, I have a lot of students coming to me asking me how to do things. And really, they don't realize that even if I told them everything they could be doing, it's going to feel way less meaningful than if they come up with a plan themselves. And so my role as a coach is never to tell a student what to do. It's to partner with them to figure out what do you think is an actual sustainable practice for you as an individual. And so my gift to you parents is really thinking about, how can you also coach your student around these things? Because it's amazing how a simple question can be the game changer for them to really start thinking about things a little differently. So then you're in that first month and you've kind of started to realize my student doesn't seem to be the best. They're not in a bad place, but they're starting to feel like almost caught in this roller coaster of emotions a little bit. I want to go out there and say right now that's very normal for your student to feel a lot of ups and downs in that first month where things are going really well. And then maybe some things are way more stressful than they thought. That is perfectly normal, but it's kind of important for you to maybe know in your back pocket that we have all different kinds of resources for your student to support them as they adjust to college. A lot of students get kind of overwhelmed by the amount of resources we have. So I've narrowed it down here to just a few to keep in your back pocket and a couple of questions to get your student thinking about what supports they would actually utilize. So I'm going to start with the questions first. Who could you ask to help you with this issue? That allows the student to think of the list that they already may have around resources, whether they've, heard them in UK 101 or they've heard them from a friend or a peer. It gets them kind of thinking about, okay, I actually do know some places to go. That can be a very empowering feeling, but also maybe I don't know. And so then that's an opportunity for you to look stuff up with them and they're bought into that process with you. They want to be in that search process with you. Second question is, what would make it easier for you to ask for that person's help? I find that this is a question a lot of students don't give themselves permission to ask. They don't think about how they could make it easier. They just think it's really hard and it's always going to be really hard. But asking that question gives them permission to think about, okay, if you know you need to go to this person for help, what would make it easier? Would it make it easier to make a talking list with you and them beforehand? Would it make it easier to go to that office hour with a classmate? Would it make it easier to be on a FaceTime call with you while they're in the study? There are all different kinds of things that they can do to make reaching out for help a little bit easier. And so asking that question allows them to think about those possibilities. So, what are some support spaces? We're going to dig into these a little bit more, but a couple students don't even think about faculty or instructor office hours. Sometimes it's important to go to the source. If there is a question that they have, if there is something they're not understanding, might as well go to the person that the material started with. Most faculty instructors are dying to help their students. They are so eager for someone to come to office hours. And I always like to paint the picture for students, when they're telling me they're hesitant to go. Well, how do you think your professor feels when no one shows up? It's usually followed by that level of silence. They're like, actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, for them to open a whole office hour and nobody comes, I imagine that's a little lonely or that's a little defeating or just sad. And 100%, I love asking that question because I'm an instructor for a couple classes on campus, and it's very sad. I always kind of share that sometimes with them where I'm like, I'm very sad when my students don't come to office hours because it's my time to get to know them as a person. It's my time to check in with you and know how I can help you better. So, office hours are a big one that get overlooked. Academic advisors, I mean, they're going to be one of the most important resources for your student on campus. They are crucial to a student's overall success. So, when in doubt, ask your academic advisor. They are so connected to everything else on campus. They are top notch resource for any questions your student has. There are also resources like tutoring and coaching, which I'm actually going to get into a little bit more with transformative learning as a whole. We are one of the learning centers on campus that encompass a lot of different resources. So just to give you a brief overview here, obviously I'm in the Office of Integrated Success Coaching. We've got about 5 coaches where we are full-time. This is our job. But then we've also got a bunch of TA coaches. So our team usually totals around 10, and we are all seeing students individually. We also offer group coaching, but that's a little bit more specific to different classes. The study is going to be a great resource for your freshmen because it offers tutoring to 100, 200 level math, science, and business classes. It is free and drop in. All of our services are free. but it is a drop-in service where a student can come in if they have one question. They can come in if they've got 1,000 questions, and they can just sit and get their homework done. And so then when a question comes up, their tutor is there to answer that question if they have it. I have a lot of students where I just encourage them to do their homework at the study because they get that accountability piece, but then also a tutor is there to fill in for them if they need it. Similar with that is Presentation U. It's again peer tutoring drop in, but it's specifically for communication projects. So that can be any classes, papers, speeches, writing materials, any kind of presentation or things like that. If it's some kind of media or communication, they can get that peer feedback or review. And they also offer e-tutoring, which is a great resource where students can send in their writing materials or presentations and get feedback within 24 to 48 hours from a peer that has been hired to look at that skill set. We've also got UK 101, 201 orientation course to the University of Kentucky, supplemental instruction, which is essentially group studying. It's actually a national program, but at the University of Kentucky's, we've got some of our hardest courses on campus have specific sessions supported by supplemental instruction where an SI leader or is a student that has taken the class, they've passed with an A. Now they're coming back to work with the instructor in that same class that they've taken and passed with an A in order to offer a group study session or group facilitated session each week based off of what material they learned that week. We have a lot of students that come to SI sessions right before the exams, and typically those students tend to score 10% higher. That's a full letter grade than students that don't attend SI sessions, but they are offered throughout the year. They are offered not just before exams, but every single week. And students tend to do a lot better when they come to SI sessions rather than try to do it on their own. Not to mention, a lot of students build great community in some of their harder classes because they go to the SI sessions and they start to get connected with other students in a smaller setting where you're talking a lot more. Then lastly, we've got peer accountability communities. These are essentially anti-procrastination groups. If your student's a little worried about procrastination, we have packs on campus where a student can sign up, and it's not course specific, it's not major specific. They can just sign up because it fits their schedule. And they're going to be meeting with a bunch of other students for at least an hour to just work on whatever homework or material they want to work on in that time. We always provide snacks. We always provide a bunch of different locations for them to choose from. But basically, everybody's committed to getting work done. Some people working on presentations, some people working on papers, but everybody's working on something. And so it's a peer accountability community where, again, students can get to know their peers in a safe space, smaller space, but also can leave knowing I got the work done I needed to get done this week. So that's a little bit of our Office of Transformative Learning, just in case you weren't familiar with our resources before for your student. The last thing I really want to talk about with you all is we talked about setting the stage for success. How do we sustain this success? And the graphic I've given you here is called, we call it the golden circle in coaching. And the reason for that is because with a lot of our students coming in feeling challenged, they come in with a what? I need study strategies. I need this problem addressed. And sometimes we get into the how. Okay, how are we going to, increase your studying? What are we going to do during your study time to make it different, more effective? But if we're lucky, we hit on the why. And that's really a student's driving point for why they're here, what they want to get out of college, what their driving major choice is. We always try to look for that in coaching because students don't think about it as much, but that is their main source of motivation. Your why for college is what's going to get you to the library when it's the last thing you want to do. Your why in college is what is going to get you out of your dorm when you know you can't study in your dorm. So, a couple questions to get you thinking about how do I get my student to the why? How do you want to feel at the end of your first semester? It's kind of hard hitting question. It's kind of hard to even think about what situation would I ask this, but it can be very casual. I mean, it It can be something as simple as you're sitting at the dinner table and you're like, yeah, I've been thinking you're about to start college and your first semester, you're going to learn so much. How do you want to feel at the end of that? What do you think you'll learn by the end of that? And it can be just that casual, that simple. And your student may not be expecting it. They may laugh you off, but you've at least planted the seed then that that's something they could be thinking about. So another follow-up question is, what do you want to achieve by the end of this semester? A lot of students know that word achieve. A lot of students know the word success. So I always like to start with the how you want to feel. But if they're struggling with feeling, if they're struggling with emotion, a great follow-up question is just what do you want to achieve? What do you want your, if they're focused on grades, what do you want your grades to look like? If they're focused on building relationships, what do you want your relationships to look like? Whatever they're focused on their first semester, these kinds of questions at least get them thinking about it. What am I focused on this semester? And then that last question, what will help you get there? Because we all want to help. The reason I'm in this role, the reason you're in this session, we all want to help the student. We want them to succeed. And so we kind of got to let them unpack their own thoughts first before we can truly step in and say, how can I help you get there? It's very easy for us to jump in and try to fix things right out of the gate. But I got to tell you, every single time I've worked with a student on habit change, my plan is far less effective than theirs. It has to be their idea. It has to be their plan because otherwise it's one more thing they're being told to do. So as you think about your student, you think about them coming to campus. Again, I know I gave you a lot of questions. I apologize. But think about the ones that stood out to you. Think about the ones that you could actually see yourself asking, because even if you just picked 3 questions from this whole presentation, that's 3 different avenues of success that your student may not have thought about before today. So I hope this was helpful. I hope I can answer some questions that you all may have around this stuff. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about it. But yeah, that is all the material that I have. And here is how to contact us. So as you can see, my department is transformative learning. So that top link right there is the link to our website if the slides get shared. So that's the link to the transformative learning website that has all the resources that I talked about. You can also email us directly, either at Transformative Learning or IS Coach is the coaching email. But also we do have a direct link to scheduling coaching appointments. So I've included that there. And we are also on Instagram, TikTok, X, Threads, YouTube, and Facebook. You just have to look up UK Transformative Learning and we pop up. And that is a good place to get information about us if you want to follow so you can share it with your student as we post videos and stuff. I mean, I've made quite a few videos this summer around coaching tools, tips, tricks, apps. We share all kinds of things on our social media, as well as when Common Hour studying is available. So it's just a good way to get fast information about our services. And with that, I'm gonna give it back to Nancy.
Yeah, Madeline, that's such great information and really good food for thought. Before we get to the first question in the Q&A, you mentioned Common Hour studying. Would you mind, for folks who might not be familiar with the Common Hour exams, explaining how that's going to work so when they hear their student maybe use that term in the upcoming semester, they'll know what they're talking about?
100%. So some of the biggest courses for freshmen on campus actually do Common Hour exams where they'll bring in a lot of students from a lot of different sections all into one massive exam session at usually it's in an evening hour. I'm not sure why, but usually it's a Common Hour exam because it's a Common Hour shared by multiple sections all coming together. And I've heard Common Hour exams for chemistry courses, math courses, all different kinds of, again, really, really popular courses. But Common Hour study sessions are offered through the study. And basically, they are in the weeks leading up to Common Hour exams, typically that week before a Common Hour exam. They will do a massive study session where everybody who's going to be at that Common Hour exam is invited to come and make like kind of mini group study sessions all in one room. And the room is filled with tutors. So the tutors are going around to different sections. Classmates are learning a lot from each other because they're all in the same boat. They all want to pass this exam. So they're practicing stuff together. And then the tutor can come in when they get stuck and kind of answer any questions that they may have.
Yep, that's helpful to know for sure. All right, so Lori picked up on the fact earlier that you mentioned that students could pick up a planner when they come to campus. So I put this in the chat, but also wanted to make sure if folks weren't looking at the chat that they knew that yes, UK orders paper planners, knowing not everyone is a paper planner person, but for those who might be, those will be given out at Tech Takeover during move-in and K-Week. Tech Takeover is where they'll pick up their iPads. We're giving them some digital tools there, but then also giving them the opportunity to pick up a paper planner. I worked Tech Takeover last fall. I was helping out at the UK Invest table, and it was interesting to me to see students trying to decide if they wanted a paper planner or not. Madeline, do you tend to see, if paper planners are more popular with students or digital? I know obviously it comes down to personal preference, but do you see any trends in our students these days?
I absolutely do. I think virtual is highest use just because a lot of students kind of have the same mentality that I mentioned of I'm gonna have to use this when I enter the workforce, so I might as well get good at it now. I might as well practice it now. Not to mention it is linked to their Outlook email. So if they get an email where they booked a coaching appointment, for instance, that calendar booking automatically goes on their Outlook calendar and they can color code it, they can adjust it, they can do a lot with the calendar. So I find that the virtual calendars are probably highest use for convenience sake. And I find that there is a subsect that really love the paper calendar, and they typically know who they are. They know they love paper. They know it's how they drive, and they did that in high school. And so typically they're always like, I know I should probably move into virtual, but I'm like, why? I mean, if this works for you, you know what works for you. So if they've got a past history of success with it, they can absolutely continue it in college. If it didn't work in high school and middle school where they were forced to use a paper planner, I'm always kind of like, what's the benefit of trying something again? What could we potentially miss out on by trying to make this work versus moving towards your skill set that we know already works?
Yeah, I find that one of my parenting challenges, even knowing what I know about working here at UK and all of our digital platforms and all of that, just trying to understand how my high schoolers day-to-day experience in the classroom, fully digitized in many cases, and so trying to give him my tips. Sometimes if I'm calling back to my own collegiate experience, then those might be a little dated. So I'm, always trying to channel the things I know as a UK 101 instructor and some of that. But even with that knowledge, I find that, sometimes it's hard to understand what their day-to-day experience looks like, even if we're using those things in our own professional lives or personal lives.
Yeah.
So, other families may find that that's been the case for them as well.
For sure. I mean, I'm not particularly far from the age of a college student. I'm a little past it for sure. But even I find myself noticing the challenge that these college students are facing today are different than the ones that I even faced, where it's almost essential to know how to use social media well because it is so easy to either overdo it or not use it to its fullest capability. Where a lot of students are starting to realize if they're going to be on TikTok anyways, all I have to type in is study strategies to find what we like to call study talk. All I have to do is kind of look for keywords like chemistry, certain kinds of calculus things. Like if I'm gonna be on social media, there is such a thing as using it effectively or using it well. And that is not something that was a thing when I was in college. So it's just eye-opening every year to be like, wow, these students, they're in a different day and age. And so kind of appreciating what they're up against and what they're trying to figure out and really appreciating the ideas that they can come up with. Sometimes that's our greatest superpower. It's just being like, dang, I never would have thought of that, but that's amazing that that works for you. Let's explore that more.
Yeah, I can say that Study Talk is showing up in my TikTok algorithm, not in
Right.
use just now. So Tracy's asking, she says in high school on campus was used by their faculty to post assignments and due dates. Is there something similar at UK?
So I'm sorry, what was the beginning of that question for
That
Canvas?
in high school on campus was used by their faculty to post assignments and due dates, and asking what we have similar at UK, so our learning management platform.
For sure. So our faculty in every course uses Canvas, which is kind of everything you need to be successful for your course. You're going to have to know how to use Canvas. It's got a calendar feature where you can see when everything is due for points, but also really going into each class and looking at the modules. I'm going to go ahead and say the word modules multiple times here because it is one of the best buttons in Canvas where you get to see a week by week layout of what's everything essential to this class this week. It's going to have, if the professor provides the slides, that's where the slides are going to be located. If a professor provides supplemental materials like readings or podcasts, it's going to be in modules. And it also has the assignments and it has the instructions. Like everything is listed very clearly in modules. And if a student just uses Canvas Calendar, they're going to miss a lot. That's the biggest pitfall I see with students in Canvas is they will only use Canvas Calendar, which is great. That's everything due for points, but you're missing out on so much more of the class by not going into each course and looking at modules. So that's typically what you see. Canvas is laid out to kind of have a dashboard for each class that the student is enrolled in. And that's going to be where your professor's syllabus is that has all the information for the course, their office hours information, a Q&A platform. Sometimes if a student has questions, they can ask either in a discussion board for the class, or Canvas has an internal emailing system. So you can message your professors through Canvas with questions. Some professors prefer Canvas, some professors prefer Outlook, but it's really crucial to understand how to use Canvas that first week for sure. Nancy, anything you think I missed with Canvas?
No, I think that that's really good advice. And I know in my UK 101 section, we're talking about using Canvas, and in fact, some students have used it in high school and are showing me like different integrations and things that I'm not even aware of. But for those who it's a new learning management platform for, there's some support for that too. And even I think if students are struggling to figure out how each individual instructor is using Canvas, I think that's a great intro to go into office hours with and say, hey, we've just had our first class or two. I'm wanting to make sure that I'm well organized to succeed in this class. Can you walk me through some things I need to know about this Canvas setup? Would you agree with that?
I really would. Yeah, most professors are going to use it pretty similarly. But is it worth the risk? Is it worth the risk of not knowing how this specific professor for a class that you're worried about is going to use Canvas? Because some professors, especially if it's like a math class or a chemistry class, some professors will use a system other than Canvas to do the homework assignments. And so it's really important to know for the classes I'm taking, is it all on Canvas? Or is there a secondary platform that I'm going to need to understand as well? That's not every course, that's just a few, but if you're in one of those few, then you have to learn the secondary structure as well.
For sure. So we've got a question asking if you have any recommendations for the best virtual planner to use, because there are so many. So do you have any favorites or ones that have been popular with some of the students you've coached?
Okay. Okay. So, yes, I do. If it's a virtual calendar, I tend to use Outlook because every UK meeting invite I get is going to go directly to my Outlook. So if it's a calendar, it's Outlook. I do also use Google because it's how I get a visual of what my life looks like. I use Google Calendar. Apple Calendar, that's just if I've got like a last minute appointment, I need to put something on there so it alerts me like, hey, don't forget you're getting coffee with a friend in 2 weeks. But as far as a virtual planner, I got to be honest with you, there's some beautiful ones on Canva. If your student wants to design their own planner and print it or keep it just as a virtual thing that they make notes on their iPad, They get a free Canva account through UK, and Canva has some of the most beautiful templates you can possibly imagine. So they can design it however they want it to look, but it'll give them a starting point most often than not, where it's here's a template for you to start with, and then you can make the edits that you want to make. So those are my top recommendations. As far as secondary apps that are popular, Structured is a really popular app. Um, what's the other one? No, Opal is screen time. I'm gonna have to pull out my own phone for this. I keep a apps tab on my phone for what are the recommendations I get from students. Mind List. So Structured and Mind List are really helpful planning apps. And if they need a screen time app, just while I'm here, Opal is a really good screen time app to limit the time that they're using on screens. So it's just a bonus recommendation for you.
Yeah, as soon as you mentioned screen time, I was like, oh, let's hear those recommendations too, because I do think that, that's something again that I didn't have to deal with when I was a student years ago. And, just trying to manage some of those digital distractions, plus the in-person social distractions while students are trying to get work done. Yeah. Lori's mentioning that Up Ahead is popular too. I don't know if that's one that you're familiar with.
I will write it down to check it out. I'm a big fan of trying out the apps before I recommend them, so I'm going to try that out. Up Ahead.
Yeah, I've also noticed the UK Smart Campus social media account has some really great instructional videos that they'll post on their Instagram about how to use all of the different features of the iPads. And so some of those are around time management, some of those are around note taking, and I've seen some of similar content from transformative learning on social media about, yeah, some app
Yeah.
recommendations and different tips and tricks, and sometimes just fun dances that I see you all doing.
Yeah, we tried to explore trends in order to get more traction to our page. It worked for a little bit, but I don't know if it's a sustainable project for us. But definitely, yeah, we've partnered with Smart Campus to give some app recommendations. So following them on social media is also a great way to figure out, we try to collaborate with as many people as possible because we don't want to gatekeep any information that we think is going to be helpful to students.
Yeah. And anytime I see those smart campus like quick tips videos for the iPads, I always share those to the UK parents and family social media. Because
Nice.
again, I think some students, inherently know how to use their iPad for streaming Netflix and all sorts of things, but maybe haven't had the experience of using it to help manage their lives and using some of these specialty apps and all that. So I love being able to share that information so they can make best use of the technology that they'll get.
Oh yeah, technology is essential for college now. You can't get through without it, but there is such a way to use it really effectively. And so that's something we talk about in coaching all the time is rather than trying all the things, what are a couple of things that we know will work for you? Because let's be honest, it can be overwhelming. All the tips, all the apps, all the things. So that's another reason where if your student's really overwhelmed with all the things they think they should be doing, you can recommend they come and talk to one of us because we can help them nail down what's the most important or most impactful things we could be doing because it's physically impossible to do everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. And, we are such a resource rich institution, but that can also be overwhelming. And students don't always know where to start. And so I do think starting with a coach is a great place. Starting with an academic advisor is also good. Just folks who can sit down with you one on one and help tailor the conversation to the student's specific needs. So both really great kind of starting resources there. Rebecca has asked, she said, I assume the topics you discussed today will be covered in UK 101. What other topics? So would you mind sharing a little bit about whether the things that you talked about today do get covered in UK 101 and then what else is in the curriculum?
So, from what I've talked about today, there is a time management lesson in UK 101. So, that absolutely gets covered. However, UK 101 is also just really helpful to help the student actually determine the reality of things they will need, where they will help them figure out how to download all the Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint apps that they're going to use for free. Figure out, what kind of communication your professors expect from you, how to be professional and represent professionally in that setting, as well as just um, how to ask for help on campus, where to go for help on campus. UK 101 covers so much material in 10 weeks. It's honestly insane. Um, it's one of those places where the instructor becomes another touch point. I'm also a 101 instructor, so the instructor typically becomes another touch point to get them connected to all other resources. And one of the most valuable assignments they do in that class is called Explore UK, where every single week the student is being tasked to explore a new resource or location on campus. What did you learn about going to the study? What was that experience like for you? So they kind of get to share with each other, even, I tried this thing, this is what it was like, here's who I met. And so then they get more used to going to new places, doing new things in a very easy and comfortable way.
Yeah, and as you were talking about UK 101, I just double checked the course catalog to make sure I wasn't speaking out of turn here. But if your student hasn't registered for UK 101, there is still space available in a number of sections. And so that's something they could add to their schedule during the add drop period. And so, yeah, as a fellow UK 101 instructor, I always have to put in a plug for the good things that happen in that class. And it's a fun environment to be in with the students and supporting them in that initial transition for sure.
Yeah, they meet a lot of people in the exact same boat in that class where they may be completely different majors, but I'll tell you what, they both know what fear feels like that first day of class, and so then they sit next to each other every day after that. So it's neat to see the relationships that form just from feeling the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the first day of UK 101, I'm always like, okay, like y'all, let's celebrate the fact that you're doing this. I think this fall I'm teaching fairly early in the morning, but last fall I had an afternoon section. I'm like, let's just acknowledge what you have done today. Like this is a big day. It's a stressful day. You're anxious, but you have gone to multiple classes. You have found your way to all of them. Like you have fed yourself lunch in some form or fashion. So like, let's celebrate just the little victories that got you to this point.
I love that. Absolutely. Because that is another thing. Again, I think I mentioned it on time management, but yeah, reminding your students that they will need to eat, they will need to move, they will need to take care of themselves. A lot of students just think about classes. So as much as they get through that first day, it's not until the second or third that they're like, now how is this actually gonna work?
Right? Like, how do I build a fully, full-fledged routine out of this? I've got to structure my days somehow. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. So folks, if you have any other questions, please do use that Q&A. Madeline, while folks are doing that, I want to call back to some things that you said earlier. You mentioned habit change and trying to help students with habit change. And then you also mentioned, student pitfalls. So I'm curious, from your role as a coach, what are some of the habits that students maybe get into that they do ultimately need to change? And what are some of those pitfalls that maybe you haven't addressed yet that folks can be aware of that are out there, and maybe again ask the right questions and get students to the right resources so that maybe those pitfalls don't happen to them.
Yeah, I find that some of the most successful habits are asking for help. When a student feels comfortable enough to go to an office hour, student feels comfortable enough to talk to their TA or peer instructor that like, hey, wait, what was this? What do we have to do for this? One of the best things a student can get comfortable with is asking for help, because not a single person gets through the UK start to finish by themselves. It is physically, mentally, emotionally impossible. And so the more comfortable you can be out of the gate asking for that help and being honest with what help you need, the further you're going to go, the more resources you'll get to take advantage of, the more opportunities that will be presented to you, the more you make connections. But also, I think one of the common pitfalls I see are kind of the opposite of that, students taking it all on themselves and just saying, I'll figure it out. it's on me to figure it out, that kind of belief that you're alone in this or that there's an expectation that you have to figure it out by yourself, that can be really damaging to a lot of students. The semester moves a lot faster than you expect. Yes, it's 16 weeks, but it moves really fast. And if you spend 5 weeks trying to figure it out by yourself, that's potentially already 2 exams that have gone by, 2 or 3 exams that maybe you didn't do well on. And so then that last half, third, whatever you have left of the semester, you're just trying to recover. And so that fear of, I need to figure this out for myself, sometimes that can be really harmful to students and make it really hard to recover in those first few weeks because no one expects them to figure it out for yourself. I didn't know what was going on my first few weeks of college, but luckily I was in a UK 101 and I did meet my academic advisor pretty early. And so those kinds of things did make a really big difference. So I think just validating for students that like it's normal to be afraid. It's normal to be tense and scared in this new environment and situation. Everybody else is feeling that, but you don't have to stay in that feeling. You don't have to stay where you currently are. You can move out of that and into something new. I think that's some of the most successful students I've seen have realized that pretty early, where it's okay, clearly what I'm doing is not working. So how am I going to pivot? How am I going to change? What maybe the way that I'm doing this isn't the best way to do it. So I'm going to open myself up to other ideas.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. I've got a couple of questions now that we're plugging UK 101. Got some questions about potentially equivalent courses. And so I don't know how much you know about this. And I'm kind of also doing some searching in the course catalog for answers on the side too. Dina says, my student enrolled in a course with the business school that's in lieu of UK 101. Can't think of the name in the moment. Do you know if it will cover similar material? And, I know that some of our colleges do have equivalent orientation programs. I don't know if you know anything specifically about the one at Gatton College, Business and Economics.
I know a little bit about it. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means. They do cover similar things. It's nice to have a college equivalent because they will cover very specific things that you need to know about that college, and every college is different. So I love that they're in that Gatton specific. A couple things you could think about, and Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but just because they're in a course specific introduction course doesn't mean they can't also be in UK 101, which is way more generalized. Is that right, Nancy?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question for their academic advisor as well. In case there's any question. Same thing for this next question that we have, asking if EPE 174 covers the same topics as UK 101. I just pulled up its listing in the course catalog. It's sounding a little different to me, Madeline. I don't know if you know anything about EPE 174.
As far as I know from what I've heard from students, it is different material. They're pretty similar in that they both want you to do well, they both want to connect you to resources, but how they go about teaching that stuff, I believe, is different. And again, maybe it's not possible for your student to take both classes. I'm not going to recommend something that an academic advisor does not sign off on, but it is also one of those things where if a student is taking a college equivalent, they're going to get a lot of good information from that college specifically. And they could easily supplement what they're missing in UK 101 by meeting with a coach, by talking with their academic advisor, by kind of seeking those outside resources, but being intentional about asking, now, what is it that you do? What can you help me with? And what do you think as a freshman I should know? Those are probably three good questions to ask those support people to just kind of give yourself the opportunity to be like, how do you fit into my plan of success? Because anybody could be that person for your student. It doesn't have to be UK 101, but it just happens to be a course that can fulfill that need for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, whether it's UK 101 or one of the college specific equivalents, it's serving a lot of the same purposes. It's getting good information to them. It's helping them build an on-campus support system. And so the details about it matter a little less than, again, them finding some connection, finding some good information, and using that as a springboard for their success here.
Absolutely. Yeah, really finding your people is going to be a key here.
Absolutely. So it looks like we've taken all of our open questions. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up as we approach the 1 o'clock hour here in the Eastern time zone. But I want to thank Kate being behind the scenes, putting some good links in the chat. And Madeline, you gave such good food for thought, and really appreciate your time. Before we send folks off, want to remind you that we've got some upcoming Cat Chat Live webinars. Next week, we'll be talking to the Office of Residence Life about life in the residence hall. So earlier in the series, we talked very specifically about move-in, but beyond that, it's a whole year of life in the residence halls, and want to hear directly from some of the staff who will be supporting students in the halls, and they'll be taking your questions. A week from today, we'll have a really great presentation. We hope that these social connections students will make here won't result in conflict, but I think we also know that when you put humans in community, there is opportunity for conflict, and so we want students to have some resources to think through how they productively manage that conflict, and we want families to know how that they can support students in their conflict resolution efforts, whether that's with classmates, roommates, what have you. So our Office of Student Conduct has some really good information for you. And again, then in the coming weeks, looking at involvement and finances and wellness and safety and all sorts of good things. If you're planning on joining us live for any of those Cat Chat Lives, registration links can be found in the Cat Chat family community. If you're not able to join us live, as we've said before, that's no problem. We know folks are busy, and so just look for those recording links in Cat Chat after each webinar. That's where you'll find a recording of today's webinar as well. For the Cat Chat family community, I would never miss an opportunity to encourage you to use that as a resource. There's great ways for you to customize the Cat Chat family community where you're getting topics that are of interest specifically to your student, to your family. There's ways for you to edit your notification links so that you get weekly emails if that's a cadence that's going to work best for you. And again, there's just good information there. If I do say so myself, even if I'm the one managing that. So Madeline, if you wouldn't mind advancing to that next slide, and they'll see the URL there for the Cat Chat family community. But once again, thank you so much for joining us today and for the good information from Madeline. We hope this serves you well as you support your student, not only in the initial transition, but throughout their time here at UK. I think having those questions in your back pocket is never going to be a bad thing when students come to you for support and advice. So with that, we'll sign off, but wish you a great rest of the day and hope you will join us for our future Cat Chat Lives. Take care. Thanks so much, and go Cats. Bye, everyone.